Earlier today, I said I'd be doing my next video making fun of F1 clickbait, but something big has come up that I need to cover now. And this is something that will affect Formula 1, WRC, and every other motorsport potentially, but it's still a breaking story, so there's things yet to be revealed. But what we know is that this is something that can rock the FIA to its core, so even if you only watch F1, this story still matters to you. So instead, I'll have no video tomorrow and 2 videos today, but fear not, I'll be back on Wednesday making fun of F1 clickbait, so give me some recommendations in the comments. Anyway, the big story, what's going on? During the 2025 Rally of Sweden, Adrian Formeau gave a post-stage interview in which he said a swear word. The FIA hit him with a €30,000 fine as a result, with €20,000 suspended. Rally drivers are paid much less than F1 drivers, and a fine as big as €10,000 will be felt by most rally drivers. Many drivers in the lower classes of rallying are there at their own expense, and scraped every dollar they had together to make it to the rally, and €10,000 is the minimum fine for swearing, meaning this fine would apply to them too, not just the guys in the top class. So how could this completely shake up Formula 1 and every other motorsport as well as rallying? Let's look back to the 1980s. In the 1980s, Formula 1 drivers created a trade union for Formula 1 drivers called the Grand Prix Drivers Association. Formula 1 drivers actually had a strike in 1982, and this was part of the broader FIA-FOCA war at this time that threatened the FIA and nearly resulted in the FIA being replaced entirely and an F1 breakaway series forming. I made a video about this and the history of the FIA on my main channel. It's called Who Actually Are the FIA? But to cut a long story short, the rally drivers have unionised and want changes made. The drivers in the World Rally Championship have formed the World Rally Drivers Association, or WoRDA. Members of WoRDA include all current drivers and co-drivers in the top Rally 1 class, Julian Ingrassia, and various WRC2 crews, and they aren't happy with the FIA or Mohammed bin Sulayem. They released a statement that I've pasted into the pinned comment, but if things escalate, which I believe there is a fairly high chance of happening, this is when things could spill over into other motorsports as well. The World Rally Drivers Association was formed to give drivers collective bargaining power and the ability to challenge the FIA, the teams or WRC promoters authority depending on who they're unhappy with. And at the moment, it's the FIA specifically they're unhappy with. So, how do they exert their power as drivers collectively? By going on strike. If they don't do something that'll hurt the FIA, they're useless as a union. They haven't announced a strike yet, but Dirtfish reported it as WRC drivers ask for urgent discussion with FIA president. If they don't get what they want from this discussion, the only options they have are to back down or to escalate. If they back down, they might as well not even bother in the first place. Strikes, or the persistent threat of a strike if you get on the wrong side of your employees, are the main way that unions get stuff done. And this is the same whether it be train drivers union or a rally drivers union. This could disrupt the WRC's Safari Rally, as there may not be any drivers competing in the top class, and many missing from the bottom classes. WRC is regulated by the FIA, but commercial rights holder is WRC Promoter, and they own all the broadcasting and trademarks. WRC Promoter is owned by Red Bull and Carver25. WRC Promoter would not be happy if the drivers went on strike, as the commercial rights holder, the Safari Rally being disrupted, would cost them big money. Safari is one of the biggest and most prestigious events. It would be in WRC Promoter's best interest to get this sorted. Now, the FIA have 2 possible solutions here. They can either back down and make changes, or they could double down and punish drivers further to assert their authority. This second one is where things could go wrong, and it's what I think the FIA will do given Mohammed bin Sulayem's track record. Because if neither the FIA nor the drivers back down, a strike will be inevitable. This would disrupt the Safari Rally. WRC promoter, then unhappy, would have three options. One is to just accept the loss in revenue, but what kind of business just accepts lost revenue? One is to put pressure on the drivers to drop the strike. Red Bull sponsors most of the field and they could cut sponsorship to most drivers. But again, this would be stupid. It would be a PR disaster, and there's still drivers who aren't Red Bull backed, especially Oliver Solberg, whose main sponsor is Monster Energy. You know who would love the chance to get a whole bunch of positive press? Exactly. So option 2 would be a dumb option for WRC promoter to try as well, especially for Red Bull. This gives WRC promoter option 3, to pressure the FIA. They could do this by forming a breakaway rally not under the FIA's regulation. There is precedent to this. The 1980 Spanish Grand Prix was a breakaway Formula 1 race after the promoter had a disagreement with the FIA, as was the 1981 South African Grand Prix. Another breakaway event in Africa? It's possible. Even as recently as 2009, teams threatened to create their own championship for 2010. There is entirely a precedent for this to happen. But if they rally without FIA sanctioning, this is where all the other motorsports become relevant, because it would create a legitimate... This is where all the other motorsports become relevant, because it would create a legitimacy crisis within the FIA. If WRC can go without the FIA, maybe Liberty Media would feel like taking full control over F1. After all, they want to take a bit more control over F1 from the FIA. Maybe ACO could control the World Endurance Championship. It opens the floodgate. I'm sure many of you are licking your lips at the thought of motorsport without the FIA, but motorsport without the FIA would be a bad thing, and there's a very good reason for that. The alternative is much worse. WRC promoter is half owned by Red Bull, who sponsor lots of drivers. The FIA might have a lot of problems, but one thing you can say in their favour is they aren't paid off. The FIA are commercially neutral. They don't have a financial interest in any one team or another. They aren't going to disqualify cars from teams that aren't commercially aligned to them. If Red Bull controlled WRC's officiating, would Oliver Solberg suddenly start getting penalised all the time? What about Liberty Media controlling F1's rules? They recently referred to F1 as not sport, but as sports entertainment. That's the term WWE uses to describe itself, and that's because they can't call themselves a sport because it's scripted. F1 is not scripted because the FIA is commercially independent from Liberty Media. If Liberty Media asks them to script it, the FIA can just say no. Free of the FIA, Liberty Media can truly script F1. You might not like the FIA, but you'd absolutely hate the alternative. That's the big thing. If the FIA doesn't make changes to their policy on swearing, the drivers are likely to go on strike in Kenya. And I would support that entirely. I think the drivers have a fair point. If the drivers go on strike in Kenya, WRC promoter and the Safari Rally's event promoter is incentivized to run the event without the FIA. If they do that, the floodgates are opened, and this could ruin motorsport. This scenario is entirely possible. It's the 24th of February 2025 as I write this. Maybe this video will go down in history as just another oddity in motorsport. After all, nothing ever happens, right? Maybe another scenario will unfold. But the scenario I have described is an entirely probable and possible series of events, but there may be one more option. If a breakaway series established a governing body that's financially independent, they could do so without turning motorsport into scripted sports entertainment. But trying to match the financial independence credibility of a 100-year-old organisation with a brand new organisation that nobody's ever heard of would be difficult. But there is one possibility. The ACO. They do some of the regulating for the World Endurance Championship and Le Mans. The ACO has a pre-existing legitimacy, in fact it's older than the FIA, a very good reputation among motorsport fans as well. Another organisation is SRO, who are responsible for the GT3 regulations, or possibly even an ACO-SRO combined organisation as a new alternative global motorsport regulator. or perhaps even having all regulations being done by the National Automobile Club of the country the event is in. There is precedent for this, as RACE was the officiator for the 1980 Spanish Grand Prix. But this is still early on, and in a week, lots of people will have had time to think and discuss this, and potentially come to even better answers. What do you think will happen? Write your thoughts in the comments.